Hi.
Hello, this is the first of a series on Daniel. Daniel, was he a Jehovah's Witness, is the overall theme. And the reason we ask that, what to Christians would be a ridiculous question, is because to Jehovah's Witnesses, and especially the young Jehovah's Witnesses, Daniel is a very significant figure. Adult Jehovah's Witnesses use Daniel for several other reasons, but maybe it's good to take care of why Daniel is such an important figure in the Watchtower view of the world, and especially their own identity. So how were you introduced to Daniel when you were a young Jehovah's Witness?
I can remember my mother reading us Bible stories from one of the early witness publications. And so the story of Daniel and the lion's den was very familiar to me, as well as the story of the three companions and Daniel being asked to stand before a statue. Mm-hmm. And I think that one in particular was used to kind of prepare us for going to school and having to stand apart from the rest of the kids and perhaps being persecuted, just like they prepare people when they study with them right off the beginning. You're going to be persecuted, your family's going to be upset with you. They do this with young children as well, so that you're geared up to the fact that you're different than the other children. Your stands are going to be different. These aren't all bad things, I would say. You know, they prepared me to stick to my guns when I believe something, which is a good thing.
Good lessons for all believers.
Yeah.
But with a witness, it's part of your identity, and
Yes.
it's what sets you apart from all other kids at school, and then later in your life, of course, from all other people who claim to be Christian. So I think it's worth noting too that Daniel is one of the few characters of the Bible, of the Old Testament specifically, that doesn't have any bad stuff attached to his name and reputation. Like Joseph in Egypt. So he's a perfect role model for the young Jehovah's Witness. Mm-hmm. But when you're an adult Jehovah's Witness, as I was not a witness when I was a child, unlike Vivian, but when you're an adult witness, you use the book of Daniel for a couple of different purposes, both related to the last days. So of course it's now an identity in a second sense. ID, your badge, your peculiar gospel having to do with the last days. What does Daniel do for that scenario? Well, Daniel supplies you with one of your key Armageddon texts. Daniel 2:44, in the days of those kings, God will set up a kingdom that will never be brought to ruin.
Using that one.
And it will destroy and crush. So your Armageddon idea is derived from that text among a handful that's available in Scripture. But also the peculiar badge doctrine, the 1914 idea, is tied up with Daniel chapter 4. Mm-hmm. The idea of a prescribed time of 2,520 years is tied up with this story, the strange story of King Nebuchadnezzar being dethroned and being like a beast for 7 years. Mm-hmm. And we'll get to more of that in one of the later episodes. So
I was never very well versed in that.
You couldn't figure that one out?
No, that was beyond me.
Yeah, it seems though witnesses never get really comfortable with explaining that one to others, but nevertheless it's a foundational teaching.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what we wanted to do was to delve into the various ways in which witnesses use the book and show you why it's so useful, because really if there's any book the Watchtower shouldn't advocate Jehovah's Witnesses using, it's the book of Daniel, because it tends to, let's say, disappoint when you examine the story of Daniel and his companions a little closer.
If you know what to look for.
Yeah.
So this is where it could be helpful to ex-witnesses to get past certain ideas, but also if you're trying to reach a Jehovah's Witness, a loved one, a neighbor, a companion, there are things that if you know what to look for, it's going to be very helpful.
Well, here's a few of them. Things to look for and to use when you're using the book of Daniel with a Jehovah's Witness. Why Jehovah's Witnesses should not use Daniel? Well, there's actually in this section 3 different reasons that the witnesses would not want to use Daniel if they only knew the facts about even what the New World Translation says about Daniel. Mm-hmm. One is his name itself. Second would be the form of his education in Babylon. And third would be his job. And then we'll add a fourth, which is his religious status in Babylon. So for at least 4 reasons, Jehovah's Witnesses would, shall we say, be stymied, if not completely stultified, if you just bring forth these facts, which are, of course, played down, shall we say, either in the New World Translation or in the witnesses' discussions of the book of Daniel. First of all, his name. So we thought, in a kind of a preface to discussing the name of Daniel himself, we should talk about the exile. And we have a quote from Leon Wood, one of the best commentaries
To show you it.
on Daniel from a conservative point of view. Leon Wood is very solid and can be advocated without any kind of reserve on our part, although I would say, like Revelation, you can't just have one commentary on Daniel. There's just too many different points of view on it. But here's Leon Wood on the 3 exiles that we're talking about. You have to bring to any discussion of the book and its background.
Okay. The main blow to Judah came in 586 BC, when Jerusalem was destroyed and the country became a province of Babylonia. 11 years before 597, however, a prior taking into captivity had occurred when Jehoiachin ruled, and some 10,000 leading people were carried to Babylon. 8 years before this still, Daniel and his 3 friends and other young Judeans had been forced to go. That's in 605. Their captivity in Babylon is the occasion of central interest in the book of Daniel.
So we have 3 exiles, and the one that's uniquely mentioned in Daniel is the earliest, 605. The 3 stages to the exile. So when you talk about the 70 years that the Watchtower makes so much of as being the period of exile, you can't do that. There's 3 overlapping exiles.
That is something I didn't become familiar with until after we left the witnesses.
Yeah, and that's very, very important, because when you get to Daniel 9 and you have Daniel meditating on the 70 years itself, you have to get into his mind. What would he think the 70 years was about?
Right.
So we'll deal with that one later too. But I think it's important here to just look at the names of the exile prophets. The 2 that we associate most with the exile would be Ezekiel and Daniel. And you notice as you look at the Hebrew structure of their names, both of them have the form El, the generic name for God, in its short form, as part of their compound names.
Yeah.
Whereas Jeremiah, who was a prophet in the land, not in the exile itself, he has the compound of Yahweh.
Yeah, the whole concept of compounds in the name, though, I don't remember it being talked about at all in Jehovah's Witnesses.
No, I never remember.
And it is significant, and it does really impact your understanding of their time and of the books that they wrote. Why are their names like that?
You mentioned a certain psalm came to mind.
Oh yeah, I had always liked Boney M's song, Rivers of Babylon, and I knew it was straight from Scripture, and it does follow that line. But there was an insight in that scripture or song when they're being ridiculed and they're told by their captors, sing a song for us from your own
Song of Zion.
Yeah, a song of Zion. And they say, how can we sing a song of Yahweh in a foreign land? Well, that gives us a little hint, a little clue as to the thinking of the people. There was something about using God's covenant name when they were outside of their covenant land, and also when they're being punished.
Being punished.
So you can understand why they might be hesitant to use God's name under those circumstances.
They felt humiliated. Now, Sinclair Ferguson brings up that point in this commentary on Daniel in the Communicator's commentary set. Sinclair Ferguson talks about their humiliation would affect their desire even to speak the name of God. And as we go through the book of Daniel in this series, we'll talk more about that. But the key idea seems to be, what psalm was that, by the way?
137.
137, if you want to look it up. By the Rivers of Babylon.
Yeah, you can look up the song too.
But it does relate to the name. So if you're naming your baby, or for that matter, just doing business in Babylon, as Ezekiel and Daniel were in their own context, you might have a different name altogether, as indeed Daniel gets a new name when he gets to
he's given a new name.
Babylon.
So, and that's all part of the idea of the captors too, to distance them from their own place,
Yeah.
from
yeah.
their own country. So this was not something new.
So in the next segment, we'll talk about Daniel's education and his job and his religious status in Babylon and how they can help with dialogue with Jehovah's Witnesses.